Um, all right, we are going to move on and talk about the other big topic of the day, which is the Federal Reserve and our continuing waiting for Godot kind of game here as we wait for the announcement, perhaps, of a different Fed chief. Our Brian Cheung, aforementioned inventor of the Cheung rule, although no sneakers in this shot because
It's a great rule.
Brian
No, not today.
is
It's a
at
great
the
rule,
office. So what is the latest on as we wait for this?
Yeah, I feel like they should just billow smoke at the top of the Eccles building whenever the announcement is out there. We've been waiting so long for some sort of time frame, and then finally we got some hints as to when we should expect the Biden administration to actually announce something. The president saying in passing yesterday, quote, "As my grandfather would say, with the grace of God and the goodwill of the neighbors, you're going to hear that in about 4 days," referring to a Fed chair announcement. I haven't heard that quote ever used before, but apparently the point is we should expect to hear something towards the end of this week or even maybe through the weekend of a Fed chair announcement. Now, it sounds like the final two candidates are boiled down to current incumbent Fed chair Jay Powell and the current Fed governor Lael Brainard. We've talked at length about the differences in their monetary policy thinking, but it's important to remember there are a number of other things at stake for this Fed pick as well when you consider climate change, for example. Obviously, this has been a big priority of the Biden administration within the Federal Reserve. Fed Governor Lael Brainard has spearheaded efforts on trying to drive more bank regulatory considerations to the financial risks that are associated with extreme weather events or the transition to greener energy. And then obviously, crypto also will be in view, even though the Federal Reserve isn't a primary regulator of cryptocurrency itself. Recall that the Federal Reserve is thinking about issuing a U.S. digital dollar, which in and of itself could be a competition to the private issued stablecoins and the broader crypto space. Now, of course, the SEC, the CFTC, a whole alphabet soup of regulators are also involved with the broad Biden approach to the cryptocurrency space. Of course, we'll see if the next Fed chair has a seat at that table. But just a friendly reminder that as the deliberations continue, there are many more issues at stake than just interest rates when it comes to this decision, guys.
Brian, I want to get your take on this. In a new Yahoo Finance exclusive op-ed, former FDIC chair Sheila Bair said this about Lael Brainard. Quote, "She is astute, smart, and one of the few who understands the intricate complexities of financial regulation and the pockets of systemic vulnerability that can prove problematic should the Fed have to raise rates to combat inflation." And Bair goes on to say, Brian, quote, "Brainard has far superior qualifications," of course, in reference to Jerome Powell. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is pretty significant because obviously you have a lot of people trying to opine on the pick here, but this is a former regulator herself, again, at the head of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which works hand in hand with the Fed and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency on regulatory issues. And she's really criticizing the current Fed chair, Jay Powell, for the deregulatory aspects of his leadership over the last few years. Now, one caveat to that is that the regulatory agenda over the last 4 years was really driven by Trump appointee Randall Quarles, who was appointed to head the supervisory portfolio as the Fed's vice chair of supervision was his actual title. But of course, Jay Powell, who runs the whole thing, greenlit a lot of those changes. Now, when it comes to Sheila Bair's kind of criticism here, she's saying that through all of this, Brainard has a track record of opposing a lot of these, what they called tailored tweaks over the course of the last few years. Of course, that's how Quarles was billing it. Sheila Bair sees that a lot of these issues may have actually destabilized the system. She worries that kind of loosened liquidity and capital requirements on some of these larger banks risk the possibility of another financial collapse, especially as the Fed readies a possible tightening of its policy in the COVID recovery. So, of course, she's kind of airing out these concerns, saying that Brainard, who dissented a lot of these Quarles-driven initiatives, would be more stringent on financial regulation, which is the reason why she would advocate for Brainard. Of course, that's a big difference between her and Powell. Again, we'll see if the Biden administration wants to go through the political challenges of nominating Brainard, who many in the political circles see as a tougher candidate to get through the Senate. Remember, whoever the pick is from the White House also needs to get that majority vote from the Senate.
And Brian, I also want to remind folks that the top spot at the Fed is not the only one that's empty, or not empty, but up for change, right? There are a number of other positions within the Federal Reserve. And even though the person at the top is the one who is the most visible face of the Fed, we could see a pretty significant shift in composition. But will that shift significantly the tenor of the Fed? It doesn't seem like I mean, I keep hearing the word continuity used by people within the Fed, right? So I'm just curious what this is going to look like a year from now.
Well, this is a really good point that you bring up. So immediately there would be two other positions that they could fill here or nominate for. The vice chair, Richard Clarida, his term and that role expires in January of next year. We know Randall Quarles will be stepping down at the end of next month. And then actually there's still a vacancy on the board. So there's three vacancies at the Federal Reserve right now. And if Biden were to go with Lael Brainard instead of Jay Powell, and Jay Powell were to leave the Fed, that would actually open up a fourth spot on the board. So there's a lot of kind of chatter about whether or not the Biden administration would want to take a kind of just let's all announce the nominees in one slate. That would allow them to maybe have an incumbent like Jay Powell, but then kind of hedge that with more progressive candidates for those other vacancies. That's something that we're not sure about in terms of what they actually plan to announce, whether or not that happens Friday or over the weekend. What we do know is that at some point they'll have to make those nominations. Maybe it would be easier and even politically more convenient for them to announce that as a slate later this week.
Brian, what I also know is that you've received very strong report in a new poll that I put out on my Twitter account. I mean, you're running neck and neck. There it is right there with Lael Brainard as the potential next Fed chief. I mean, Brian, this is big. Any comment? Any comment here?
Well, the sample size is a little small. And then secondly, I can confirm that I have had no conversations with the White House about any of this, but at least I'm ahead of Larry Summers there. But I'm not at all a front runner for this position. Thank you very much for the love, though.
You have to be in front of Larry Summers. I mean, it just has to be that way. But good to see you there, Brian.
You deserve to be there. It's biased to your followers, though. There is a bias to your followers. So
maybe.
As long as we can just adopt the Cheung rule, it doesn't matter if he's in charge of the Fed or not. I need to get some shelves put in to put my sneakers up there.
On the shelf, and you have to rotate them every week. That's the Cheung rule. Every week.
Exactly. I like it. All right. I think you need to tweet that and do a poll on that as well.